Spark RDDs, then the main object that we interact with, it's like the main entry point that we tell this object read the CSV or read the parquet, is the class Spark context. There is a similar class which is named Spark session. Spark session is used as the main, just as we used Spark context as the main for RDDs, then Spark session is the main for Spark SQL. And Spark SQL is the environment, the library that was created after the RDDs. It's using under the hood the RDDs. The RDDs are the distributed data structures. On top of it, we have the Spark context for RDDs. Okay, so in phase one, we had RDDs and we had Spark context, and we told the Spark context read the CSVs. In phase two, we have Spark SQL, and in Spark SQL, instead of Spark context, we use the Spark session. The Spark session is the object that we use in order to get, again, the main object that we use to interact with Spark. And so we write in a Spark application, Spark session, which, as we said, is used for Spark SQL as the main object, Spark session dot builder, because it gives us the builder pattern in order to create the Spark session. So we actually write Spark session, the class itself. We don't write new Spark session or something similar. We just write the name of the class, and the name of the class is Spark session with the S, with capital S and another capital S, Spark session.builder, and then we can write .app name, give it the app name, .master, give it a string of a local star, and etc. And then we get back an object. This object is the Spark session object, which we use in Spark SQL applications. At the end of the application, we write we assign the Spark session.builder.appname.master, and then we call get or create. We assign it to some variable. Let's say we wrote Spark is Spark session.builder.appname.master.get or create, and we assigned it to a variable with the name Spark. Then at the end of the application, we call spark.close in order to close and release all the resources. In order to load the file, let's say that our Spark session, we assigned it to a variable, then we call this variable with .read.csv, and we see again the pattern of having an object and then calling .something. So we call spark.read.csv, and we could, instead of .csv, we could say .json or .text file or even .jdbc in order to connect to SQL. If we used spark.read.csv, then in brackets, we would give it the file path to read. And we could also tell it whether we have headers or not with .option. .option headers true. If we do have headers in the CSV files. Now, what would be the return object of this Spark session.read.csv? It would be a dataset. So while in the original version of Spark, we had RDDs that they distributed data. Then and over there we use the Spark context as the main object to get the RDDs. Now we use the Spark session as the main object to get RDDs. It's a little bit mixing up because we have Spark context and now we have Spark session. Spark context is for RDDs and Spark session is for Spark SQL. Then we get the dataset from the Spark session after we read the CSV with spark.read.csv and with the .option header is true. And we get the dataset. The dataset would be of type dataset of type row, which means we just have a bunch of rows. And then now we can call this dataset, which is pretty similar to RDDs. We have methods like dataset.count to count how many rows we have in the dataset, which would return a long. And we would have a dataset.show in order to print to the screen the sum 20 rows, and it would truncate if the string of the values of the rows is too large. And we work with this dataset, and also we have a data frame in the Spark SQL. We could call the dataset and call a method to convert it to a data frame. So basically we have RDDs. RDDs we create with Spark context. Now with Spark SQL, that also allows us to write just plain SQL on top of Spark. We have Spark session, because Spark session.builder.update.master.get or create. At the end, we write spark.close for the Spark session. We can read files with the Spark session with spark.read.csv. Then we would get back a dataset, and this dataset is dataset of type raw. Then we can call this dataset to convert it to a data frame or to call the .show method or .count method.